You want to get close to someone who pushes people away. You want to love someone whose instinct is to run when things get real. You're not broken for wanting this. It means you've tasted a love so rare, it's worth reaching for. But let me tell you the truth. You will never break through an avoidance armor with pressure, logic, or pursuit. Their walls weren't built to keep you out. They were built to keep pain out. And if you want in, you have to become the one thing they've never experienced: safe love, without an agenda. This kind of connection starts with your energy, because energy doesn't lie. You can say all the right things, but if you're hiding your desperation, they'll feel it. If you're trying to manipulate closeness, they'll sense it. But when you show up as someone who is whole, not hungry, curious, not controlling, present, not pressing, that's when their nervous system starts to say, maybe this isn't danger, maybe this is different. You see, love is not a transaction, it's a transmission. You don't reach them by trying to fix them. You reach them by embodying something they never thought was real. You become peace. You become presence. You become the mirror they didn't know they needed, one that reflects not who they are when they're afraid, but who they could be if they felt safe. And don't confuse patience with passivity. No, this is the warrior's work: to hold your ground, to stay consistent when they pull away, to not personalize their fear, to not beg for crumbs. It takes strength to keep your heart open when theirs shuts down. It takes power to respond with calm instead of chaos, and it takes wisdom to know that their silence is not rejection, it's protection. They've learned that intimacy means loss of self, that love is followed by pain. And so every time you try to get closer, they're scanning for danger, not because of you, but because their nervous system remembers something you never caused. And you have a choice: react to their fear or lead them through it. So what do? You stop trying to be the exception. You become the example of what it looks like to love without force, of what it looks like to stay without suffocating, of what it looks like to speak truth without blame. You show them that they can exist in connection without disappearing. You teach, not through words but through presence, that closeness can coexist with freedom. And you trust the divine timing, because growth doesn't happen on your watch. It happens when their soul is ready. And maybe, just maybe, your love isn't meant to heal them instantly. Maybe you're just the seed, the one who showed them that not every love burns, that not every hand takes, that not every presence demands. That's how you get closer than anyone else. Not by pushing past their armor, but by becoming the presence that makes them take it off themselves. Because true love doesn't invade, it invites. And when they choose to meet you there on their own terms, in their own time, you'll know. You didn't force your way in, you earned your way close. And that kind of closeness, it changes everything. Avoidants don't fear love. They fear what love has meant to them in the past. For many, connection is associated with pressure, criticism, or feeling like they have to give up parts of themselves to stay close to someone else. So when you try to connect, their nervous system isn't hearing your words, it's scanning for signs of threat. You might be saying, I care, but what they hear is, you're about to be invaded. This is why force, even in its subtlest form, never works. You can't demand intimacy from someone whose survival has depended on avoiding it. You have to learn to offer something they've rarely felt in relationships: emotional safety. Emotional safety is not about tiptoeing around someone's wounds. It's about being grounded enough in your own center that you don't wobble when they pull away. It's the energy of, I'm not going to chase you, but I'm not going to leave either. It's the unspoken message that says you're free and still deeply seen. This kind of energy is magnetic, it's healing, and for someone who has learned to armor up the moment things get emotionally intense, it's revolutionary. Because here's the truth: most avoidants didn't grow up with secure love. They didn't learn that they could be close to someone and still be themselves. They learned that love meant sacrifice. Love meant being watched, judged, or absorbed. So their guard is not arrogance, it's protection. And if you want to get close, your first job isn't to get them to open up. It's to prove with your energy, your actions, your consistency, that you're not a threat to their autonomy, that your presence won't cost them their freedom. This is the paradox of intimacy with an avoidant. The more space you honor, the more trust you build. The more you try to pull them out of their shell, the deeper they retreat, but the more you allow the shell to exist without judgment, without criticism, the more they begin to peek out on their own. This is where most people fail. They mistake withdrawal for rejection, silence for disinterest, space for abandonment. And so they react, they press harder, they seek reassurance, they become louder. But what they don't realize is that every act of pressure only confirms the avoidant's worst fear, that closeness equals suffocation. The real power lies in self-regulation, in staying emotionally anchored when they can't, in becoming a sanctuary instead of a storm. You soften their armor not by demanding it come off, but by becoming someone who feels safe enough that they start to question why they ever needed it in the first place. When your presence feels like peace rather than pursuit, when your energy says you're free instead of your mind, something starts to shift. Their system begins to relax. The guard lowers. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, and intentionally. Patience is often misunderstood. People think it means waiting silently, tolerating delays, or holding back their needs. But real patience, especially when dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies, is one of the most powerful emotional skills you can develop. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's not about sitting still and hoping. It's an active practice of strength, awareness, and emotional discipline. When someone is afraid of closeness, when their instinct is to pull away the moment things start to feel real, you can't meet that fear with your own desperation. You must meet it with calm. You must meet it with centeredness. You must become a steady presence in a world that has taught them people are either too much or never enough. Avoidants didn't choose to be guarded. They were shaped by environments where emotional needs were ignored, criticized, or smothered. So they learned that closeness can hurt, that people can get too close, demand too much, or disappear too easily. And so their nervous system starts to treat love as a threat, not because they don't want connection, but because it feels unsafe. That's why when they distance themselves, they're not trying to punish you, they're trying to protect themselves. And that's when most people make the mistake. They take the space personally. They start to chase, question, or emotionally collapse. But if you truly want to reach them, you must rise above the reactive urge. This is where patience becomes a superpower. Not the kind that waits for them to come back so you can finally feel secure, but the kind that holds space emotionally and energetically without letting your own needs hijack the moment. The kind that says, I can love you even while you're figuring out how to feel safe with me. Patience means you don't fill the silence with fear. You don't interpret their retreat as rejection. You don't play emotional games to try and get a reaction. You regulate your own emotions. You stay present in your own life. You maintain your own center. That's not weak. That's powerful. When you are patient in this way, you create a kind of safety that most avoidants have never experienced. You prove through action, not words, that you won't abandon them when they need space. You show them that intimacy can exist without pressure, that presence can exist without pursuit. And over time, this consistency rewires their internal story. They begin to learn, maybe for the first time, that it's safe to come closer, that someone can love them without overwhelming them, that connection doesn't always come with conditions. Patience is how you earn trust, not by waiting endlessly or ignoring your own needs, but by understanding the pace of someone else's healing. It's standing in a fire without burning, it's loving without losing yourself, and it's knowing that your grounded presence today may be the very thing that allows their guarded heart to open tomorrow. When you're dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies, the goal is often closeness, but the gateway is understanding. You cannot rush intimacy with someone whose instinct is to protect themselves from it. Love is important, yes, but love without understanding can feel invasive. You might be offering them affection, consistency, and loyalty, but if they don't feel understood, they won't feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, they won't let you close. Understanding isn't a soft concept. It's the emotional skill that unlocks the door to someone's inner world. Without it, you're just guessing. With it, you're speaking their emotional language. One, they rarely trust anyone else to learn. Most avoidants have built their walls over years of feeling misunderstood. They've been told they're cold when they're actually overwhelmed. They've been accused of not caring when they're just trying to self-regulate. They've been labeled distant, selfish, emotionally unavailable, when in truth they've been carrying pain they didn't have the tools to express. So imagine the power of someone finally sitting across from them and saying, I get it, you're not running from me. You're trying to protect yourself. You've learned that closeness equals loss of control. And I see that. That moment right there is a breakthrough. That's where emotional walls begin to shake, not because you broke them down, but because they felt seen. Understanding is the first step in shifting someone's nervous system from defense to openness. When you bring empathy instead of accusation, when you lead with curiosity instead of assumptions, they begin to breathe differently around you. You stop being a threat and you start becoming a safe space. This doesn't mean excusing unhealthy behavior or abandoning your own emotional needs. It means choosing to see the wounded root beneath the surface pattern. And once you do, you communicate in a way that actually lands because you're speaking from connection, not correction. Here's the truth. Avoidants don't open up under pressure. They open up when there's no pressure at all. They don't respond to someone trying to force closeness. They respond to someone who tries to understand what closeness means to them. Ask questions. Pay attention to their silence as much as their words. Notice their patterns, not as flaws, but as protective strategies. Don't try to decode them like a puzzle. Listen to them like a human being who spent years trying not to drown in emotional discomfort. It takes strength to be the one who leans in with empathy when all you want is reassurance. It takes wisdom to listen instead of react. And it takes love, real love, to create a space where someone finally says, you're the first person who's ever made me feel safe enough to stay. Understanding is not the final step. It's the first opening. Once someone feels understood, they start to trust. And once they trust, they start to come closer, not because you pushed, but because you saw them clearly. It feels like pressure. It feels like control. What they need isn't someone to swoop in and fix their broken places. They need someone who can stand beside them and simply be, without asking them to change, perform, or unravel on command. Real connection isn't built by rescuing them from their pain. It's built by revealing a new kind of experience, one that doesn't hurt, demand, or suffocate. Avoidants aren't emotionless. They're overwhelmed by emotion. They've likely had experiences where their vulnerability was punished, ignored, or used against them. So they learn to internalize. They learn to solve alone, to feel alone, to grieve alone. That isolation became their shield. So when someone rushes in with saving energy, trying to hold their hand through every feeling, it can feel like a threat to their independence. They don't need someone to reach in and take over their healing. They need someone who can witness their experience without judgment or urgency. Someone who knows how to hold space without trying to fill it. You reveal a new experience not by speaking the perfect words, but by offering a new kind of presence. One where silence is not abandonment, where stillness isn't a sign of giving up, where love feels like freedom, not obligation. It means letting them sit with their feelings without rushing in to soothe them before they're ready. It means allowing them to move through their emotional process at their own pace, even if it's slower than what you're used to. This is where maturity steps in, because your impulse may be to fix, to clarify, to wrap things in a bow so it feels less uncomfortable for you, but that impulse often has more to do with your fear than their need. To someone avoidant, the most healing thing you can do is demonstrate emotional sovereignty, your ability to manage your own reactions, stay grounded, and love from a place of steadiness. They are not used to love that doesn't require performance. They are not used to being held emotionally without being pressured to open up before they're ready. When you stay in your center and offer connection without force, something begins to shift. Their defenses relax, not because they've been conquered, but because they've experienced something new, something safe, something calm. This is not easy work. It takes spiritual discipline to stop trying to rescue someone and instead embody a kind of love that allows them to rescue themselves. But when you do, you give them something far greater than temporary comfort. You give them the lived experience that intimacy doesn't have to cost them their independence. And in that space, closeness becomes a choice, not a demand. When you stop trying to save them, they begin to see you not as another person who wants something from them, but as someone who simply wants to be with them just as they are. Emotional integrity is the foundation of any secure relationship, especially when dealing with someone who leans avoidant. When their instinct is to guard, to withdraw, to put up walls rather than let you in, it's not because they don't feel, it's because they've learned to protect their feelings by hiding them. And in those moments, your greatest test is not about how much love you can pour out, but how deeply you can embody emotional responsibility. Can you hold your ground when they pull away? Can you stay present when they shut down? Can you remain emotionally honest without becoming emotionally chaotic? That's the real work. That's what builds trust. Avoidants often come from backgrounds where emotions were either punished, dismissed, or weaponized. They've seen what happens when feelings spiral out of control, so they learned early on that the safest way to survive was to stay disconnected, not just from others, but even from their own emotional world. So when you show up in their life and react to their defenses with your own insecurities, snapping, begging, withdrawing, you confirm what they already believe, that closeness leads to instability, that being vulnerable means chaos, that letting someone in means losing control. But what happens when you do the opposite? When you don't match their retreat with a chase, when you don't mirror their silence with panic, when you respond to their shutdown with a calm truth like, I'm here and I care, but I won't force you to talk, that's emotional integrity in action. It's not about being emotionless, it's about being emotionally anchored, about owning your feelings, expressing them clearly, and not making your internal state someone else's responsibility. That kind of energy is rare, and it's magnetic to someone who's lived their life preparing for emotional disaster. You see, what avoidants fear most isn't love. It's the emotional instability they think always comes with it. So you have to be different. You have to be the one who doesn't need to raise your voice to be heard, who doesn't need to play games to feel valued, who doesn't need to dominate or disappear when things get tough. You have to show them what regulated love looks like, what it feels like to be in the presence of someone who doesn't punish or perform, but simply stays consistent, clear, and calm. This is how you become the mirror they didn't know they needed. When you're grounded, they begin to see themselves differently. When you're emotionally clear, they begin to trust what's real. When you stop reacting and start responding, you become the first safe nervous system they've ever encountered. Over time, that experience begins to rewire their sense of safety and connection. They learn slowly and quietly that maybe not every relationship has to end in fear, that maybe they can be themselves, messy, distant, unsure, and still be met with compassion and strength. Emotional integrity becomes the soil where trust grows, not loud, not fast, but deep. There's a moment in every emotionally difficult connection where your ego wants results. It wants answers now. It wants the other person to change, to meet you, to open up, to reassure you on your timeline. And this is where most relationships with avoidance begin to fall apart, not because there's no love, but because one person is trying to control the pace of someone else's healing. But the truth is, no matter how much love, patience, or intention you bring, you cannot force someone to be ready. Readiness doesn't come from pressure. It comes from a shift inside them, a shift that happens not on your watch, but on divine timing. Avoidants don't work on predictable timelines. They don't open up linearly. One day they may seem deeply connected. The next they may feel distant. That's not a flaw. It's the rhythm of someone learning how to feel safe in connection. And you may be tempted to interpret their inconsistencies as rejection, but often it's just a protective dance, one step in, one step out. They are trying to figure out if this love is different or if it will become what they've always feared, too much, too fast, or too demanding. That's why trusting the divine timing isn't just a spiritual idea, it's an emotional necessity. Because if you try to force the bloom, you damage the seed. Your presence matters. Your consistency matters. The way you speak, the way you stay grounded, the way you handle their fear, all of it is planting seeds in the emotional soil of their experience. But seeds don't sprout the moment you drop them. They need time. They need the right environment. They need nurturing, yes, but they also need space. Your energy may be exactly what helps them heal, but the healing won't happen on cue. Divine timing means surrendering your need to control the outcome and instead showing up with love, regardless of how fast things move. There's power in surrender, but not the kind of surrender that gives up or abandons. This is the kind of surrender that says, I trust that what is meant to unfold will unfold when it's meant to. That kind of faith is not passive, it's deeply active. It keeps showing up but without grasping. It keeps loving, but without chasing. It stays present, but without demanding results. When someone senses that your love has no timer on it, they begin to relax. And when they relax, they become more open, more real, more themselves. You can't rush someone out of fear, but you can create a space so peaceful, so honest, and so steady that they begin to question whether they need that fear anymore. That's what divine timing makes possible. It allows space for their soul to catch up. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back, not to leave, but to make room for growth. Because the moment their heart finally begins to open, it won't be because you forced it. It will be because you trusted the process enough to let them arrive on their own. So if you truly want to reach the heart behind the armor, let your love be steady, not loud, patient, not pushy, sacred, not strategic. You're not here to fix them. You're here to be the living proof that connection can feel like freedom, not a trap. And when you lead with emotional truth, grounded presence, and divine trust, you don't just get close, you get closer than anyone else ever has. Thank you for giving your heart to this journey, for showing up with courage, and for believing that even the most guarded souls can be reached, not with pressure, but with presence.